Sovereign wealth funds are, by their nature, often used by many countries around the world to harness national resources for economic as well as for social development. They are often used to preserve and to grow a country's wealth for the benefit of future generations. In a document that was published in December of 2021 by the National Treasury, they described some of the features of a sovereign wealth fund. And they say that such a fund is often a state-owned company that would accumulate resources for capital investment through a dedicated revenue instrument or instruments. It would then invest these resources in different asset classes. Countries with sovereign wealth funds, and there are quite a number of them around the world, often maintain surpluses in their current accounts and balance sheets or balances. This provides the fiscal space to establish a sovereign wealth fund. At present, with our current fiscal position, with substantial current account and budget deficits, it is currently not the most opportune and favorable time for us to establish a sovereign wealth fund. However, there are a number of options that are under consideration. Funding for service delivery remains under pressure for us. Additional resources are required to improve the recruitment of key personnel such as police and teachers. Yeah. We also need to increase investment in the maintenance of basic service maintenance, or infrastructure rather, their natural resources to establish and sustain sovereign wealth funds. In our country, however, the public revenues or royalties that we derive from mineral resources have historically not been very reliable, or have they been very consistent. We have therefore suggested that one of the possible routes towards the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund is through the reform and consolidation of state-owned enterprises. This is the route that a number of countries have used, and the one example that I got to know of was Singapore through Temasek, Dubai, or the UAE through their Investment Dubai Fund. We are working to implement a new centralized ownership model for our state-owned enterprises. As I said in the opening of Parliament, the establishment of a state-owned enterprise holding company will give us greater capacity to build a sovereign wealth fund in equities, and it also supports economic development by funding a number of business development projects. So that is well managed. Now, what we would seek to do is from the proceeds of state-owned enterprises, we would then build a sovereign wealth fund. And I'd like to believe that with good corporate governance processes, the money should be well managed and akin to what we have been doing through the PIC up to now. So I don't really see much of a difference. What would the money be used for? The money would be used for, yes, economic development. Sovereign wealth funds are often used for that, and in some cases, they even declare dividends to the state, to National Treasury, so that National Treasury can then carry on with its other normal funding activities. For many years, our rail system and ports have suffered from underinvestment, particularly in infrastructure, in equipment, and in the maintenance of that equipment as well. This has contributed to deteriorating performance of our economy. This trend was exacerbated during the state capture period. Funds were diverted away from pressing infrastructure needs. The poor condition of our rail network and the inefficient operation of our port terminals now represent what I would call a binding constraint on economic growth and job creation. This has implications for key sectors of our economy, such as mining, agriculture, and manufacturing as well. We are urgently working to restore our logistics system and to restore it to world-class standards. A number of our port outlets used to be amongst the best in the world, but they have deteriorated over time. As a result of Transnet's limited balance sheet and our constrained fiscal resources, we need to mobilize capital for this from the private sector, where the money is. During the 6th administration, Operation Vulindlela, together with the Department of Transport, commissioned research on the opportunities for private sector participation in the logistics sector. This research found that there is significant appetite for private sector investment in ports and rails. It also found that a clear and consistent legal and regulatory framework is needed to unlock this investment. It requires a level playing field for private operators. This work itself informed the development of the Freight Logistics Roadmap and the private sector participation framework for the rail sector. And the roadmap was developed through consultation of the various key players in that sector, ranging from business, even labor, and government. Significant progress has already been made in implementing the Freight Logistics Roadmap, which was also approved by Cabinet in December 2023. Transnet has published a draft network statement for the rail system. This will enable private rail operators to access the network for the first time. Transnet is undergoing a fundamental restructuring process to separate infrastructure from operations. This is through the establishment of the Rail Infrastructure Manager and the National Ports Authority as independent subsidiaries of Transnet. Private sector participation is being introduced also in container terminals. This is starting with an equity partnership between Transnet and an international terminal operator for the Durban Pier 2 container terminal. A dedicated private sector participation unit has already been established by the Department of Transport to identify and develop further opportunities for private investment. These opportunities would be realized through concessions, joint ventures, as well as other models. At the same time, we made it clear that the port and rail infrastructure will remain in public ownership, even as competition is introduced in the operations. We are therefore very clear that this is not a process of privatization, it is a process of concessioning, enabling those with money, which currently our Transnet balance sheet cannot support, to bring their money in and to invest to make our ports and our container terminals much more efficient. We are confident that through these efforts and by implementing the Freight Logistics Roadmap, We will enable massive new investment in our ports and our rail system. This will unlock economic growth and create jobs. I saw how a number of companies, particularly one company that made investment commitment at the investment conference the previous year and last year, how they have already invested well over 500 million rand. I was able to go to the port of Durban and to see the container terminal that they had already built, which is now working very efficiently. And the container terminal works in a way where the producers of goods bring in their products and they are contained at the port, and thereafter this container manager is then able to allocate shipment times and all that. And all that has required quite a lot of money. But in the end, they rent the space from Transnet, and Transnet is able to continue its other important work of the reforms they've embarked upon. So it creates a mutually beneficial partnership between a state-owned entity and the private sector, which in the end increases efficiency and will in time take our ports back to the global standards that they used to occupy. Bail out Eskom for something like 450 billion rand. Now, that's a burden. That's a burden that the people of South Africa will continue to carry over the next few years, where money that should be utilized quite effectively to improve education, to ensure that our health facilities are better, is then diverted to put into a state-owned enterprise. And what we are arguing is that we must lessen the dependence of our state-owned enterprises, and where we can cooperate with the private sector, and where they can put their money into a state asset, they should do so. And I'll give you a very good example. The N3, which is like the real artery of our economy, was built through a partnership, a private partnership with the private sector. They helped us build that road. And their concession will soon be coming to an end, and the road, the entire road, that is the N3, will then be handed over to government. Now that's a smart partnership. And what we are saying is that develop smart partnerships. What we would have had to do, the fiscus would have had to lay out quite a lot of billions of rands to build the N3. And the private sector was ready to come. Now, I think last year I did say that I went to Beitbridge. As Africa stands at the center of our foreign policy, we are firmly committed to strengthening the African Union, SADC, as well as an instrument or as instruments of peace, stability, integration, and development in our region as well as on our continent. Our country plays a leading role on several continental platforms and issues. We are, for example, the chair of the Presidential Infrastructure Champion Initiative, as I said. We are currently the AU champion on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. South Africa has been working closely with other countries towards the full implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. This is set to eliminate trade barriers and to boost intra-African trade and to advance prosperity for all on our continent. And we continue to work within the African Union to end several ongoing conflicts on our continent, and to restore constitutional and democratic government to countries that have recently experienced coups. We are currently involved in supporting the people of Mozambique, the people of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, South Sudan, and other countries to enhance and to ensure that there is peace and stability on our continent. As the Union Chair in 2020, South Africa led the continental response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This involved overseeing a continent-wide strategy, setting up of innovative online platforms to access essential medical supplies, mobilizing the international community to address issues such as debts of African countries, and also to secure vaccines. South Africa has consistently championed the African agenda on the world stage. Our country successfully advocated for the inclusion of the African Union as a fully fledged member of the G20. We have indicated that we will place the interests of the African continent prominently on the agenda of our G20 presidency next year. South Africa has also stressed the value of the BRICS alliance to advancing Africa's developmental agenda. And as chair of BRICS last year, our country invited representatives from other African countries to attend the summit that was held in Johannesburg. 46 African countries attended, including 20 heads of states and government. So we continue as a country to pursue an independent foreign policy. Through our foreign policy, we aim to promote our own national interest, which is based on the protection and promotion of our national sovereignty and our constitutional order. The national fresh produce market has for the longest time been dominated by existing white privileged farmers, and we need to embark on a multiplicity of initiatives that will ensure that black farmers, and particularly your small, medium farmers, do in the end have the opportunity. Firstly, they need to have throughput. They need to have throughput in terms of being able to produce more of the fresh produce, and they need land to be able to do so. And they also need assistance with the inputs that go into farming, such as fertilizer, such as the implements, and they also need financing in that regard, so that they are well financed, so that they become serious players in the sector. We also need to have the access to market opened up for them. Yes, the state can play a key role through its procurement processes, particularly when it comes to either feeding schemes that need to be properly streamlined to enable the procurement to happen. But when it gets to the market, those markets of fresh produce in the various key nodes of our country, they need to be, the small, medium farmers need to be properly empowered so that they are able to have better access. As they gain access and space at those markets, they should then be able to have their products being saleable, and they also need an active empowerment process so that the chains that sell our fresh produce should be able to procure the produce from those small farmers. So it's a combination of initiatives that we need to embark upon to make sure that indeed in the end we reposition small, medium farmers we have. And of course the other one is finance, the other one is know-how or technical skills which were eroded during the time of dispossession. We need to bring that back, and that is why we're also focusing on having extension officers trained so that they can increase the experience and the knowledge level of our people. So on water specifically, as a water scarce country, as we begin to deal with the challenge that our people, just in terms of their daily lives, not having sufficient water, we also need to address the water that they should have available for farming purposes. And that is why the farming and the water regulatory process is becoming more and more favorable to those who were previously disadvantaged. And of course, it has to deal with infrastructure. The infrastructure challenge of being able to go to a water source and being able to deliver water to where our people are is a key one. And that is where financial resources become a big determinant, but the willingness and the objective to do so is there. The Department of Water and Sanitation is committed to ensuring that we address this, but so in the end are other departments. For instance, agriculture is also going to be focusing on ensuring that farming becomes an important, and as it is, an important aspect of our economic growth trajectory. And as we do so, we need to know and have a clear objective of ensuring that water, a key resource in farming, does become accessible to those farmers in the outlying areas. So as we address through water and sanitation, the whole process of giving water to our people by constructing dams and all that, we should be able to address the need that there is amongst our people in the rural areas for the delivery of water where they are, not only for living purposes, but also for commercial purposes. Yes, the challenges are immense. I must admit that we face a number of challenges. The lack of support to emerging farmers has been the bane of our problems over quite a long time, and the absence of extension officers. One country that has done extremely well, as I got to know, is Ethiopia. They made it a point to train 40,000 extension officers, and having trained so many, that just revolutionized their agriculture and made agriculture a big contributor to their GDP. Now, we have been making steps or taking steps to increase the level of extension officers. But those extension officers are often young people who themselves know very little about farming. And this is where the more established farmers, commercial farmers, can play a key role in assisting the training and the preparation and capacitation of the extension officers that we need. Every farmer, particularly your emerging sector, needs extension advice on an ongoing basis. And the underspending, you're absolutely right, is something that has also bogged us down in building dams. And yet there are new innovative ways of constructing dams more cost effectively. It means that we need to mobilize engineers who are more attuned to new ways of building dams, because yes, you're right, it is through the trapping of water that often ends up in the sea that we will be able to increase agriculture and improve opportunities that farmers can have, emerging farmers. because quite a lot of our land lies derelict because of lack of water. And if we can, as you correctly say, build new dams, that is precisely what we can do now. Department of Land Affairs and Rural Development, as well as Agriculture, are going to be focusing on precisely these challenges that we face, and making sure that even with agreements between ourselves and our neighboring countries, we've had a challenge between South Africa and Namibia, as well as Botswana. And all those matters are now going to be negotiated so that we continue to have that access, as we would want them to have access to our own market with whatever produce that they are able to have. Because in some cases, they are saying they want to block our products so that they can increase their own capacity. They are much smaller populations, and in no time, they should be able to produce their own, and they will need a market, and we should be their market. So all these challenges, Honorable Trollip, are matters that are on our radar screen. Agriculture can and will be a great job creator, and we need to focus on all those subsectors of agriculture that can be good job creators, that can lead to development and the continued entry of Black emerging farmers into agriculture, into various sectors. I should say that that is continuing to happen, but we need to hasten that pace. And you say that there hasn't been much progress. We need to hasten that, but in a number of subsectors of agriculture, it is beginning to happen. We're seeing more and more activity. And I've just been hugely impressed by seeing how many citrus farmers, how many Black farmers are now in the citrus industry. And in the citrus industry, where they are actually exporting as well. In the sugar industry, we're dealing with a lot of small-scale farmers, particularly in places like KZN and Mpumalanga. So these are small-scale farmers that continue needing assistance and support. And we need to spread that more to get into grains, to get into maize. In livestock, there's a plethora of emerging Black farmers who are in livestock. So we do need to get into the other niche areas where Black farmers can participate well. In April 2019, I spoke to the residents of Alexandra about the challenges that they faced. I made reference to a program for the whole of South Africa to build 1 million houses. It is quite clear from the recording of what I said that these houses were not just for Alexandra. There is simply not enough space in Alexandra to be able to develop and even approach the scale that would amount to 1 million. Housing in Alexandra has long been a challenge. Many people continue to move to Alexandra due to its proximity to economic opportunities. This strains existing resources and increases housing demand. There is lack of available land for development in and around Alexandra itself. This is made worse by the land invasions and the growth of informal settlements. Under these conditions, the different spheres of government are working together to address the housing challenges in Alexandra. Plans are underway to build approximately 40,000 houses in Frankenwald and in Linksfield, benefiting the residents in the area and others in Alexandra. One of the urgent tasks is to relocate approximately 8,000 households who are in the flood lines or plains of the Jeskei River. An enumeration process to establish which household will be affected has been completed. Various land parcels have been identified for relocation. Studies on the suitability of the land have been completed on secured land portions. One project that is known as the Linksfield development has secured township proclamations for a proposed 10,000 units. The costing and engineering approvals have been obtained. Construction of social housing and open market units have also started. Another project, the Frankenworld development, is currently in the township proclamation phase, and it is projected to yield 30,000 units. The government is actively working to unblock and complete various stalled housing projects in Alexandra. Progress has been made on projects like Helen Joseph Hostel and Kwanobuhle Hostel, which with designs, approvals, and beneficiary administration processes that are underway. The City of Johannesburg has obtained an evacuation order to relocate households in flood-prone areas. Environmental assessments are underway to identify affected households, and efforts are being made to secure land for relocation. Units have been constructed in other smaller projects like the Marlborough Gardens, the Marlborough 2nd Avenue, and Madala Hostel. The specific challenges in Alexandra create a complex environment for housing development. These challenges require a multifaceted approach as well as collaboration between various stakeholders to overcome them. Now, progress is being made, and government remains committed to delivering housing solutions and improving the living conditions under which our people live in Alexandra. Mazibuko, our National Treasury is seized with this matter on an ongoing basis, and they are focusing also on the regulatory aspect, but working together within the broad framework that has been set by the African Union as well. You may recall some years ago, former President Thabo Mbeki came out with a report that detailed how illicit criminality has been rampant in our continent and how best it can be dealt with also at the continental level. So our National Treasury, in the wake of that report and work that is being done through various structures on the continent, including in our own region, is firmly seized with this challenge and matter. It continues to preoccupy even the officials in our National Treasury, and legislation or regulations are following in tow to ensure that we deal effectively with this challenge. So be rest assured that this being an overarching challenge and problem is a matter that is being addressed. Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Yes, there have been discussions, particularly around our natural resources, to focus on our natural resources and to establish a forum in our region which will enable us to have common approaches, common frameworks, so that when it comes to natural resources, we're able to exploit them much more effectively as a whole rather than just individually. And as you correctly say, a number of our countries are finding a number of key and important mineral resources. Namibia recently, yes, an oil find, and more searches are happening is also on our western seaboard to be able to see whether that whole plateau also has intrusions in South Africa. And that leads to cooperation and collaboration, not only focusing on criminality, but focusing also on how do we enhance our own ability to better exploit the natural endowments that we have as a region. And a forum in that regard is being put in place. Mineral Indaba is able to collaborate with his counterparts, not only from the entire continent, but also from the region, about a number of these minerals. So there is an effort at the subcontinental level, but also more broadly at the continental level. And we've raised this at our heads of states meeting, where we have also discussed how the management of our resources can be enhanced, particularly, in countries that are just new in having found these very rare minerals, like rare earth and lithium and all that. So we are working on approaches that can enhance the management of the wealth that all the countries have come across and have been endowed with. That is exactly what you are going to see. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.